Hi all, we are going to learn how to reuse the mapping. For example, if we have 20 or more than 20 mappings in a mapper to create a DTO object or any other object, then we need to copy the same set of mappings for create and update and respective conversions as well. Later, if we need to modify any one of them, then we need to modify at all the places. So this might be resulting to error prone or missing one or two properties when you are configuring it at different locations. And if we need to create a source object from the target DTO object, then we need to add the mappings as well. It looks simple, but when we have nested beans or nested mappings and a different set of DTO classes, then the complexity increases. So to solve all these problems, we need to reuse the existing or configured mappings and modify if necessary. Mapstruct supports reusing the mappings and the mapper configurations. All we need to do is add a few set of annotations and override them using the mapping annotation wherever it is required. Now let's check the current setup. So as part of the current setup, in the test case, I have the before each where it sets the source ID, source first name, date of birth, salary, and mapper object and the source object has been created at the test class level. Before each method is annotated with before, so it will be triggered for each and every test. So here the first test case is to DTO where we create the DTO object and we are creating the object and we are validating a few properties. And even for the update also we are doing the same. We created an empty DTO object and we call the update DTO with the source and validating few properties. Now let's check the mapper. In the mapper, default map settings, for example, first name, last name is being set directly and remaining date of birth, it is using as a date of birth in a string format because in the DTO, we have string of date of birth, string of salary, age integer, service in years integer. So as part of the to method, we're setting the first name, last name, date of birth, salary and age. In case of update, along with the first name, last name, date of birth, salary and age, we are setting service in years as well. So let's check the implementation. In the implementation also it is setting up the date of birth, salary, age, first name, last name to create a DTO object. And in case of the update, along with that we are calling service in years as well. Age and service in years are called by the qualified by name and qualified by annotation, and those two are defined in the age operations and the service operations where dummy implementation is there. So if we check, map age has a dummy implementation, and even for the qualified by, which is mentioned at the service in years, here also a dummy implementation is being provided. So in both the cases it will come more than 0. So that is exactly we have written in the test case. Age greater than 0, service in greater than 0. To reuse the mappings, we need to add inherit mapping annotation. If we have more than one similar mapping methods, then we need to provide the name of the method from which the mappings needs to be reused or the copied. So in this case, we have first three are common for both of them, which means even to create and to update, it's the same set of mappings that are required. So instead of it, we can use another annotation, which is inherit configuration. For example, this is just for an example. If I have two methods, then the compilation would fail. The Mapstruct raises a compilation error that it can't determine from where the configuration needs to be copied. So to avoid the ambiguity, we need to use method name. In this case, toDTO. If we configure wrong method, then we will get the compilation error. So the method should exist. So toDTO, I'm taking it, I'm taking out this one. So I always recommend to use the name and give the proper method name from where the mappings needs to be configured. Let's check the implementation. In the implementation, first name has been set, last name is set, age is been called, and salary, everything is called. Along with that, service in years. In case if we need to override any one of them, for an example, if I need to override age, then how are we going to do it? So just for the testing purpose, I'm overriding the age and setting as a constant 20. So let's check the implementation. In the implementation, service in years, date of birth, salary, everything is called. Along with that, set age of 20, which we configured as a constant. Let's revert the code changes. So let's save it and let's run the test case. and all the test case has been passed. If we need to create source object from the target object, for an example, public %db object to source, and here is the %dtu. In this case, without any configuration, so default values which are been same data type or the same name would be configured. So the toSource method has date of birth has been trying to convert it into the date object, and the salary has been converting into the double object as per the data types, and remaining is been set as is. But in our case, we are overriding date format as DDMM YYY, and in the number format we are using INR the number format. So in such cases, how are we going to do it? That's where we have inherit inverse. So what exactly does it do? It's going to take the configuration of the mappings and inverse the same. So in our case, I'm giving to copy the methods from the 2DTO, and the Mapstruct is going to construct the DB object using the configurations of 2DTO, but in an inverse manner. So let's check the implementation. In the implementation, earlier it was using simple date format. Now it is taking exact format. And later, even the decimal format also, it took it appropriately and tried to convert it into a salary. And in this case, the qualified by name, qualified by annotations are not being called because those are driven by another method, another custom method. So that's the reason those are not being called. If we need to use the age or service in years to set couple of the properties, then we need to override the mappings using mapping annotation with custom implementation by using qualified by name or qualified by annotations. So let's write a test case for the toSource as well. To save the time, I have written the test case. I have created a DTO object and set first name, date of birth and salary, and I call the toSource using the DTO and capture it and ensuring that it is not null, and I added a couple more assertions. So let's add one more assertion for the last name, which is supposed to be null, asset null source2 dot get last name. And let's run the test case and check the results. Now all the test has been passed as we expected. So the source object has been created from the DTO and all the expectations has been met. Now let's check the sharing the configuration at the mapper annotation. What I mean is, for example, if we have a set of configurations at the mapper annotation, such as null value properties or any other configuration has been set at the mapper and we would like to reuse it, then how are you going to reuse across all the mappers? Why do we need to share the same configuration? Because to maintain the uniformity across all the mapper implementations. Here I have added 4 additional configurations at the mapper. One is for the target policy, which says that ignore. If any of the target properties has been ignored as part of the mappings, then we are saying the Mapstruct to ignore it. If we set it as warning, it gives a warning, and if it is error, we will get the compilation error. So for now, I am setting as ignore. And if I need to use the same settings across multiple mapper classes, so that's where we have that shared configuration feature at the Mapstruct. To save the time, I already written a config, which is a %dto mapping config. As part of the %dto mapping config, all the null properties has been set and the target policy also set. Along with that, I added one more common mapping from source to, which is db object to DTO. And I added other than first name, last name, I set date of birth, salary. And we are going to reuse this configuration at our mapper. So let's go to the mapper, and how are you going to do it? This is the place where we use config. We need to configure %dto mapping config class. Let's save it. So all the configurations would be coming along with the null check and ignore target also. How would we know? Ignore target is not giving any errors or anything in this case of the 2D2, because here service nears is ignored. That means our configuration is working. For example, if I change it to the error, then we will get an error at the person mapper because it's been inheriting the configuration for the %dto, and in the %dto config, we set unmapped target policy as an error. So that's the reason we got an error. So let's reset to the ignore. If we check the implementation, null value properties has been considered as part of the source code generation for the mapper. And it's the same for the source as well. Now, how are we going to reuse it? So here we need to use inherit configuration, and when we save it, we'll get the error because there are multiple are there. What are those? We have the update DTO and map person DTO common as well, which has been configured as part of the person DTO mapping config. So how are you going to avoid the ambiguity? By providing the name. So here we are going to use the exact name that was given here as part of person DTO mapping config. Let's copy the same name and error has gone. We are copying only date of birth and salary, and we are not having any age related configuration. So we are going to set another mapping for the target of age, and the source is the date of birth and qualified by name, and here we use map age. We get the compilation error at the mapping for the date of birth because as part of the age mapping, we are using the date of birth as a source. That's the reason when we inverse the configuration, the Mapstruct got ambiguous situation whether it has to use date of birth as a date of birth or the age. To avoid the ambiguity, let's add the mapping annotation. Target is date of birth and source is date of birth and date format is DD, MMM, YYY. So let's run the test case just to ensure everything is working. All the test case has been passed. Now what about these uses? Can we move these things into the configuration? Yes, all mapper configurations can be moved to the DTO mapping configuration. So let's copy the same over here. And wherever this configuration will be inherited, these additional classes, which is age class and service in years classes, would be part of that mapper. So let's rerun the test case. Test cases are good. So far we have learned how to reuse the mapper configurations and the mapping annotations, which means source to DTO or DTO to source configurations. With this feature of the Mapstruct, we can save a lot of time when we have the similar or the same set of beans is being used across mappers. Thank you.